Hey guys, in this part of the section, we're going to take a look at more variables. In the last video, there are a couple of other variables that I didn't mention. Like, we know that there's int, right? We used int and we used a string. And there's more variables that we can use. For example, you want to print a number that can store decimal values. So, instead of using int, you use double. So let's say we're going to store someone's money. I'm just going to call it cash is equal to 12.45. And then you can just, when you print it out, it's going to give you that value. And let's wait for it. There we get 12.45 on the terminal. But if I try to store this value in a string, it's not going to allow me to do that. So therefore we should keep it as a double. But that's not all we can do. We can also store like single characters, like a single character in a variable. So if you want to store an F, or you want to store someone's initial, but as you can see, nothing's happening because we have to wrap this around single quotes. Remember, in strings we use double quotes, right? Now in this part we use single quotes because we are trying to store one character. And then we use this char data type, which is used to store a single character. Now when we run this, we are going to get the output of this character down here. So those are the other variables I wanted to talk about today. And as you can see, I'm sure you've noticed that this char and an int and also double are like colored orange. But when we talk about strings, as you can see over here, we get it in white text. I'm just gonna put a value of string inside this. As you can see here, we get string, but it's not colored like orange, and it's also not a it's not a small letter. It doesn't start with a lowercase letter, it starts with a capital letter. So why is that? That's because a string, there's two different types of data types. We get reference data types and primitive data types. Now all those other data types that are colored orange, those would be primitive data types, and this one is called a reference data type. I don't want to get into that for now because then it's going to be more confusing, but all you need to know is that they're just different. They're not really the same types of ways to store data. So yeah, that is it for those data types. There's more data types I wanted to discuss with reference to int. Now with int you can store numbers up until okay, let me first talk about a byte data type. Now this byte data type can store numbers from 127 up until positive 128. So that's how much a byte can store. That's another data type. So I'm just gonna call this a number, and then I'm going to run it. Okay, it doesn't store up until 127. It stores 128. It stores up until 127 and negative 128. Pretty sure about that. Yeah. So yeah, with this byte data type, it stores integers as well, just like int, but the difference is that it can store only from negative 128 up until 127. And then if you want to store a number more than this, you would have to use this data type called short. Now short can store up until 32,000. 32,000. Of course, there's other numbers over here, but I'm not really sure precisely what they are. But up until 32,000 something, you can just look it up on Google. And So if I try to store 33,000, we're gonna get an error. So we have to keep it at 32,000 at the range of negative 32,000 up until positive 32,000. And if we want to store numbers more than short, then we use our traditional int data type. Now that can store more than that. And then I'm not really sure where like the limit of int, but I think it's around millions, if not billions. I'm not sure, but the one that can store more numbers than an int, which is the last one, that one would be called a long data type. That's long. And this one can store, I'm just going to write a number like, okay, I'm going to write a really long number like this. So we can store a number this long. This one cannot be stored in an int data type. So it can be stored in a long data type. But as you can see, we're gonna get an error here. It says integer number too large. That's because we didn't really specify as we should that this is a long data type. So at the end, we have to use an L, whether it's a small L or a capital L. We just have to use an L, and then the error will disappear. Now we're going to click run, and this number will be displayed over here. So yeah, that is it for data types, and thanks for tuning in. Keep on liking and subscribe, share to your friends, and stay tuned.